Well, we continue with the second half of the broadcast this morning on News and Views. If you have just tuned in, I am Inayat Wadi, and we stay in the company of our Salaamedia listeners, our viewers on the various platforms. One Nation, 88.9 out of Polokwane. We welcome you to the show and looking ahead at what is still to come on the show this morning. Shortly, we will be crossing live to Turkey. We'll be talking with Salaamedia reporter live this morning, Hasina Gori, who is standing by. We're also talking this morning with the head of communications at the Solidarity Union, Dr. Mornay Malan, serving court papers to declare the state of disaster unlawful. We have got an update coming through on the murder of El Dorado Park community activist Ayub Mangli, and also looking at love for Al Aqsa Week. And this morning, we'll be talking with someone live out of Gaza. But right now, we're going across to be joined by Hasina Gori, who is in Gaziantep out in Turkey. Hasina, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Walaikum salam. Yes, we are in southern Turkey, in an area in Gaziantep called Antep, which is less affected by the earthquake. However, it's been used mainly by aid organizations, relief organizations, and locals who have been displaced as a place to set up themselves and to find their way either out of the area into other safe areas, or as a spot for aid organizations to kind of have a base and then work through from there. What we've seen, through the last few days is now search and rescue missions being halted in most cases and moving into a recovery mode where there's very, very little hope. I know yesterday in one of the camps that one of the South African groups were at, there were some hope. There was a heat detection and there was some hope that there was a body that may be there, but there hasn't been many bodies that have been found as we inch, away and from like over a week mark. There's little hope that anyone who is still under that rubble, under those buildings, could have survived given the weather conditions. It is, very low single digits and going into the negatives as well for most parts in this area. It is in the middle of winter as well. This area that I am is a very commercial area. It's touristy areas where the hotels are, which would usually be a very bustling area here in Gaziantep. However, it's quite quiet. You only hear the background is emergency workers, services, police and stuff. Just and getting themselves into gear. This morning, while I was waiting, I spoke with a civil engineer from Turkey who says that they are now being brought on the ground to assess the situation when it comes to rebuilding the depth of the earthquake and the impact of it. So this is going to be quite a long process, but I just want to give you some kind of idea of where Gaziantep is and who lives here as well. So this is one of the five Eastern Anatolian regions that border Syria, and it is one of the biggest Syrian refugee population that live here. Many of them now being internally displaced. Once again, you see them moving from these areas to other towns. I spoke with Islamic Relief USA this morning, and they had visited one area where the Syrian refugees have now removed themselves from the area that they were staying in after their buildings had collapsed. So we're seeing ongoing and multiple layers to this devastation. And I just want to give you also an idea. I know, from looking at the pictures behind me, these buildings look, pretty stable, pretty fine, but they're actually right now not being inhabited by anyone. Many people that we're speaking to have, some fear of going back to their homes, especially those that live in multi-stories. Speaking about the sound of how that rock moving, against each other. That sounds of the buildings falling, it's just etched in to their minds. So it's going to be quite a long road of recovery for Turkey as a nation, for the people that live in here, the Syrian refugees as well. We know that this is not just an earthquake that affected this region, but also neighboring Syria, and their aid is being even harder to get in. There is a town called Kili, which I know that some South African aid organizations are planning to try and go to in the next few days. And we know the Turkish government has agreed to open up 2 more border gates with that town into Syria to allow for aid to move. So hopefully that would be, some kind of assistance to those, because in Syria it's a it's a double whammy of those not having infrastructure already to begin with, not having resources, not having supplies, and then having this devastation happen. I think it's just a catastrophic incident. And on top of that, in the middle of winter, when people now don't have shelters, people don't have basic needs. There was another organization that I spoke to this morning from the UK, who went to purchase supplies from Ankara, and they were getting in things like generators, cooking utensils, cooking equipment, because these are things people on the ground need desperately. There's no power in some areas. There's electricity lines that have been taken out. There's no roads that are open in some areas to allow for that supplies to even come in properly. Here as well, most of the restaurants, I see one or two open. Most of them have their shutters down. The shops that are open, the shelves are dwindling, and stock is really, really low. So this is just some of the realities and the impact of those who are still in these areas. They are going into camps as well, but also those camps are just basic need camps. They're tents, and in the bitter cold, not really enough, I think, to keep people sustainably warm. And there's fear of pneumonia as well that may set in, and further deaths following these disastrous natural disaster.
Yes, and also, Hasina, I'm just looking at the visuals behind you as well, and I get a sense of this eerie silence. And I'm sure, with your observations as well, just looking at what you see, the people around you, what is the mood like of the people that you've seen?
Every town we've been through in Ayat has felt like an eerie ghost town. It's empty, it's desolation. All you're seeing now is what was left of the people that was there. People here, very emotional, not many wanting to speak. They're not their usual. I mean, if you've ever visited Turkey, you know that the people here are very warm, they're very interested in speaking to people. They love tourists, but there's a sense of just melancholy in the air, and many just trying to, I think at this point, process, not even pick up, just process what has occurred in their country.
Yes, and just I know you've spoken to one or two of the relief organizations. What sort of challenges are they faced with at this point in time?
I think the biggest challenges people face with is getting supplies for what they need. There are it's quite a distance that they have to get these kind of aid from. Logistics of moving it in with the amount of aid coming in. I know when it comes to in the area of Hataya province, sometimes you're stuck on the road for hours and hours to get from one area to the other. Also having place to house these relief workers. Many telling us that they were sleeping. I know. African Muslim Agency, many of them, the relief workers were sleeping in the cars. Some of them managed to find the one or two hotels that are still open and available, or sleeping in tents. Also, just moving the language barrier, I think, as well at the moment, but more important, I think, logistics of finding the supplies right now and getting them to people and doing that speedily.
Yes, and last night when you and I spoke, dealing with the adverse weather conditions, and you mentioned to me went down to -10, and that obviously adding, compounding the problem.
Yes, I think when you're looking at numbers such as -10, that's snow, that's ice. There's fog in the air as well. It's bitterly, bitterly cold. And given that the earthquake took place at 4 a.m., or quite early in the morning, many people were not adequately dressed at that point. Also, when they left, they weren't cognizant enough to be able to take what was needed. So many needing, to find extra layers, to find jackets, and sleeping outside in a tent at that weather with no heaters, with just fires for them to keep warm. I think it's all just adding to this disaster that took place, and really burdening those that have been ill. I know when I spoke the first day when I got here at the airport, and one of the residents says the other fear is that some of pneumonia and people, getting hypothermia and falling ill due to that. So I think these are just all the concerns, and we've seen Turkish relief agencies, the government ones, really, really coming out in every single town I've been to. There've been temporary relief centers, camps set up by AFTA. There's aid movements. People are working tirelessly. There's food, abundance of just basic things like korba and chorba and bread and tea that's just available everywhere you go. People also just need basic needs for their children. There's so many families with children that were left displaced, and things like wet wipes, nappies, cream, clothing for babies. I think these are all just things that everything that you need to survive. One of the things that was really stark to me, and something that I don't think at that point you even think about, was where do people charge their phones? People need to be in contact. So in many of the camps we saw unofficial like charging stations, but in one of the camps in Karaman Marash, there was tables and tables set out with a generator, power supplies, multi plugs, cables of every sort, because people that have left their home may have not left even with the cables that they need to charge their equipment and their phones, and people need to get in touch with their family members who may be in other towns, other cities, other provinces, trying to find out whether or not they're alive. So this is just the sense on the ground, and every person you speak to has someone that went missing, has someone that passed on, has someone that they know, whether it was a loved one. Sometimes as much as 5 people in one family are lost. Some of them still waiting for bodies to be recovered, in a hope that even if there was no life that comes, at least they have a body to give janaza to as well. So honestly, I think for the people here in Turkey, it's quite a devastating time, and really a sad time for them as they just live through this ongoing. And remember, there are tremors that are still ongoing in some of these regions. There's at least 2,000 or even more that have been recorded since the initial earthquake that took place on Monday, and then the second one 9 hours later.
Well, obviously, Hasina, and also, we talk about the human cost as well. And my thoughts are just running through looking at the rising number of orphans in Turkey, the little ones, the babies, the young children, because that is going to come at a huge cost as well.
Yes, definitely. I remember hearing an interview a few days ago from a TRT aid worker, and he was explaining that he was a victim of the 1999 earthquake, and he and his family had spent 2 years in camp, and that's why he was volunteering. He was quite young; he must have been in his early 20s at very late, at very least. And I think it put into perspective for me that for those that were affected and the displacements that took place, it's going to be years before they will be able to, find their feet again. It's also going to be those that have the means will be able to come and sort themselves out quite easily. But it's those that are the poorest and the most vulnerable, the children, the youngs, the orphans, that may find themselves the hardest hit in this devastation, because they could find themselves displaced and internally displaced for quite a long time.
Well, Hasina, Jazakallah for that and for that update. We wish you well. Please stay warm as well. I know these are not easy conditions to be working under, but we appreciate you taking time out and talking to us this morning. So, all the best to you as well. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Walaikum salam.
Hasina Gori, Salaamedia reporter live from Step this morning out of Turkey. We're going to go for a quick break. We come back and we will be focusing on the head of communications at Solidarity serving court papers to declare the state of disaster unlawful.